Talk Radio, Liberty Talk Radio, where the critical thinking will defrag your mind of propaganda-ridden viruses induced by mass media news programming. No BS here, just the facts. And now we present to you America's quintessential iconoclastic anomaly. Wow. In Talk Radio, your host, Joe Cristiano.
Welcome everyone to Liberty Talk Radio. My name is Joe Cristiano. I'm your host today. We're broadcasting from our studio in Tulsa, Oklahoma to around the world. Folks, it's time for us to take back control of our government. Now before this bureaucratic, oversized, and self-serving federal government starves us of our property, our freedom, our rights, and our liberty. But to do this, we must shed conventional thinking regarding our political structure. We need to be revolutionaries in thought, dissidents in action. Only after we recognize what our government is doing to our freedom and our Constitution will we start taking it back. And this program is just about that. Today we're pleased to have as a returning guest Mr. William Redpath, better known as Bill Redpath. He's the treasurer of fairvote.org. And boy, do we need a fair vote this particular season, voting season. Fair Vote is a nonpartisan, nonprofit organization that seeks to make democracy fair, functional, and more representative. They research and propose common sense changes to strengthen our democracy and ensure all voices are heard. All voices are heard, folks. Remember that. Are heard, and every vote counts in every election. That task is, in my way of thinking right now, is almost insurmountable. Let's hear what is being done to truly make America great again. Where have you heard that before? During our live broadcast, you may call in with your questions or comments by calling 646-652-4620 and dial the 1 button so we know that you want to break into our conversation, make a comment. And Bill, are you there?
I am here.
Okay, Bill.
I'm playing, I'll be honest with you, Joe, I'm playing hurt today. I went to Game 5 of the Los Angeles Dodgers-Washington Nationals National League Divisional Series last night, and it went late and it ended disappointingly with Los Angeles winning the game and winning the series. And it was 2:44 a.m. by the time I made it in the door this morning.
You are kidding me! How long did that game go on?
It was over four, and I think it might have been over 4.5 hours for a 9-inning game. I don't know. I haven't read anything because I just got up in time to get ready to do this show. But it was an extraordinarily long game, and it's got to be one of the longest 9-inning games that's ever been played in Major League Baseball. And
wow.
The commercial breaks are longer during the playoffs by about a minute each, and there were so many pitcher changes. In fact, the Washington Nationals used 6 different pitchers in the top of the 7th when Los Angeles scored 4 runs. Seriously, they used 6 different pitchers in the top of the 7th inning alone. So it was draining and it was disappointing, but it's good to be with you, Joe, nonetheless.
Yeah, well, thanks so much for taking your time to be on our show. You know, Bill, talking about being frustrated, and this election season probably has to take the cake. I don't know of anyone who is even somewhat pleased with what is going on. Everyone is frustrated. No one likes anyone who's running. I mean, you can't get a decent comment other than from TV commentators, maybe, or from mainstream television. But I'm so frustrated. Wouldn't this have been a perfect year for Ron Paul?
It would have been, but I think that the Republican Party could have gone with Rand Paul, and he's not his father. He's different in certain ways,
right?
But he's a reasonable facsimile thereof,
right?
And he dropped out pretty early. I mean, there was something about Donald Trump, and I don't exactly understand what it was, but there was something about Donald Trump that rang a bell with. I believe I read where 45% of Republican primary voters voted for Donald Trump. So they could have gone with somebody who is at least highly libertarian, or at the very least libertarian-ish. He was there on the ballot, and they didn't go that way.
Right. And what's particularly interesting is that if you ask people who are Trump supporters, why are they voting for him? They don't give specific. They'll say, well, he's going to turn things around. He's not part of the establishment. he's going to make America great again. I said, well, let me ask you a question one more time. What is he going to do? And no one really knows what he's going to do. In fact, if you look at his policies, they're going to make things worse. I mean, he gets more deeply entrenched in what's going on right now. He makes everything worse.
No, his policies are horrible, especially on immigration and trade. There are some things he says that, for instance, but who really knows what he thinks? I mean, the man just reeks of having no principles and really no political philosophy, except, I guess his political philosophy, if he has one, is mercantilist, is the one that right. Seems most clear to me. And it's just, it's a very sad state of affairs, but people somehow sense that this man, his personal style, just sort of leads people to believe that he's going to shake things up. But I read, I think it was in the Wall Street Journal, it was a UPS truck driver in Louisville, Kentucky. He's going to shake things up. Well, what's going to happen? And she responded, I really don't care. She just wants things shaken up. Well, things could get worse. I mean, believe me, I really think in U.S. society, things aren't that bad. We're a rich society, not a poor one, as Donald Trump says. And believe me, things could get a lot worse. And with Donald Trump, I think they would.
Yes. Do you know, did anyone contact or urge Ron Paul to run during this political season? I mean, just because of the circumstances?
I think, not that I'm aware of. I mean, I think Dr. Paul is retired. He turned, I believe he turned 81 in the summer of 2016. I believe he's 81 now. And I think he speaks at various locations, and certainly you see him on, I believe he's on TV. I don't watch that much TV, but I see these, Ron Paul said this, Ron Paul said that. So he's certainly out there being interviewed, but I really would be surprised if he runs for political office again.
Well, he'll be on our show next week, and I'll ask him if he received any urges from anyone, so encouragement from people to run. Well, let's talk about this political season. Fair vote. I mean, when you hear the word fair vote and what we are doing, there's no connection. I mean, there is no fair vote in America, from my perspective. I recall now. I have nothing to hang my hat on. I recall when Ron Paul ran. I think it was the state of New Hampshire. He had a rally the day before the election in that state, the primary in that state, and they had overflow crowds. People were in the street because they couldn't get anyone. They filled the stadium up, right? And I think it was Romney at the time was also having a rally, and they hardly had anyone there. The next day, when they voted the counts, Ron Paul had a few hundred votes, and Romney had tens of thousands of votes. And it's amazing how people will go out, in the bad weather, to listen to someone speak, but not show up and vote the next day. Do we have a problem with our voting system? I mean, is it accurate? Are these machines rigged? Is there someone who is predetermining who's running? I'm skeptical of the whole process. I guess I'm getting paranoid at this point.
Well, I cannot sit here and say that it's rigged or that the machines aren't calculating things correctly. I do think that I think it ought to be auditable, first of all. I mean, I vote with a paper ballot. In fact, I don't even, in my polling place in Virginia, I don't even think I have an electronic machine option anymore. I think it is strictly paper ballots using, and I believe they're counted using scans. And I do think there ought to be some sort of auditable trail because, and what particularly concerns me, these stories that hackers somehow are breaking into the election systems in various states. I've heard that has happened. I don't know the details, but I do think that we need a system with integrity and one that is auditable in case there are any questions. And in so many places right now, we don't have that.
Yeah, it seemed the old system of having a Republican and a Democrat or a group of people on both sides of the fence counting the votes a check on one another, and then a third party, third party person sort of auditing what they were doing seemed to be a pretty good system, and I think it worked. We didn't hear of any shenanigans back then, but now with all this electronic voting, we hear of all these, chads and stuff like that, and all this, I don't know, nonsense.
Well, I went to Scotland in 2007 with Fair Vote as a part of a Fair Vote contingent to be an election observer in elections in Scotland, and they used single transferable vote, which I could go into if you wanted me to, but it was an election method whereby each voter ranked their candidates, number 1, number 2, number 3, in order of preference, and these were on forms that were optically scanned. Now, some of the forms could not be read. The machine said, hey, we can't read this particular ballot. So they would send the ballot to a station where there were 2 people who would look at the ballot, and they would agree. They would have to agree that this is how it is, 1, 2, 3, and then they would punch it in, boom. Those 2, and there were people who would stand there. This was not a private thing. There were actually people behind them, the public, who could also watch this process, standing over their shoulder. And I thought it was for ballots that could not be read automatically by the scanning machines, I thought it was a pretty good system to ensure that the votes were being counted correctly. And at the end of the day, you had all those paper ballots in case there was any question. They had the paper ballots there that could be audited.
Yeah. So, is there any validity to the voting machines being rigged that you know of, or is that just makes good headlines or good internet talk?
I know of no such thing. I can't say there is. I can't say there isn't. I don't know. I don't know who knows.
Well, now this election.
I will assume that there's integrity in the process. There are major companies behind this. I don't know that anything is going wrong per se in the tabulation by the machine.
All right. What is Fair Vote focusing on these days?
I'd say a number of things, but certainly a focus right now. I would say the number one focus in the electoral reform movement right now is Question 5 in Maine, which would institute ranked choice voting, pardon me, in Maine for the offices of governor, state house, state senate, U.S. House, and U.S. Senate. Those 5 offices. It would not be lower level offices. It would not be president. But this is a very, very big vote, in my opinion, coming up. I think it's very important. This is a first step down the road to electoral reform, and I really think electoral reform is necessary to end the 2-party duopoly in this nation. I think that's what it's going to take.
Right.
Because with plurality voting, so many people feel boxed into voting for the lesser of 2 evils. And I'm just, it's stunning to live in a nation where Gary Johnson is probably, I hate to say it, but probably going to get less than 10% of the vote, but Donald Trump is going to get over 40%. But Donald Trump has the major, well, I should say, older party label, and Gary Johnson doesn't. Right. But in case people don't know how ranked choice voting works, in this case with single winner elections, people would rank their choices. This is my first choice, my second choice, my third. As many or as few candidates they will rank. They could just do 1, or they could do 1 and 2, or they could do 1, 2, and 3, whatever. And then if one candidate at the end of the voting has a majority of first choice votes, that candidate wins. If not, they begin eliminating candidates from the bottom up, transferring each voter's vote to their next choice candidate until a candidate has a majority of the non-exhausted votes. And it's used in about a dozen cities right now already in the United States. It's used to elect the mayor of London. It's used to elect the president of Ireland. It is used, I believe, in the Australian Senate. So it is a well accepted form of voting around the world and in certain places in the United States. But this would be the first time that it would be adopted statewide for certain offices.
Now, there are several voting alternatives out there, and there have been books written on each one of them. The one in which you vote yes or no for any and all. For example, if there are three people, you have a voice of saying, well, I'll no to the Republican, yes to the Democrat, and yes to the Libertarian, for example. You can vote yes or no for each one. Or you can vote yes for all three, or four, or five, or whatever the case may be. I guess, why is this particular, and there's several variations of that, why is ranked force voting been selected over all the other alternatives? And there's several alternatives out that I'm sure you're much more familiar with than I am.
Well, pardon me. Pardon me. It was, first of all, ranked choice voting was the method selected. I mean, there was an initiative, first of all, that got this main question 5. That's on the ballot Tuesday, November 8th, 2016. But that is what the supporters decided to do. The reason in Maine is that they've had a number of, they have a lot of independent candidates historically. I believe Angus King is a U.S. Senator right now, and is a former governor, is an independent. And they've had a lot of elections with just plurality winners, particularly governor, recently in Maine. And so they wanted to adopt a system where actually the winner got a majority vote, and that's why they adopted this plan. And so they could have gone with another method, but they went with ranked choice voting. What you referred to sounded like you were referring to approval voting, where you get to approve
Right.
or not approve.
Right.
And there is division in I would say the electoral reform community on this question, which is better, approval voting or ranked choice voting. I side with ranked choice voting. First of all, there is no perfect voting system.
Right.
And I would agree that approval voting is an improvement over plurality voting, where you have one vote to cast for no more than one candidate. I believe approval voting would be better, but I think ranked choice voting is better. I think there can be places for approval voting, but I think it tends to be situations. For instance, approval voting is used within the Libertarian Party to elect at-large representatives to the National Committee and also the Judicial Committee. And in that sort of situation, and particularly where there are vote counting, it would be difficult to count the votes in unless we could, but we don't have the technology at hand at the Libertarian Party conventions. And approval voting counting is easier than ranked choice voting. I will grant you that. But in a situation, that's a situation where it's not highly contested. People get up, speak for a couple of minutes, elect me to the National Committee. It's not highly contested like real world, out in the real world political elections. And in those sorts of situations, I really think approval voting, and there's actually a history with something called Buckland voting, that this would be the case. That there's going to be more strategy. I mean, then people are going to say, okay, all right, I'm going to approve, let's say me, I'm going to approve the Libertarian candidate, but do I want to also approve another candidate? And there's going to be a lot of strategic voting, and I think it's going to degenerate with the vast majority of voters into a plurality vote, just like we have right now.
Okay.
But with ranked choice voting, people can rank their candidates and not risk helping to elect the candidate that they most dislike, which is the case with approval voting. But also ranking candidates conveys information, I think, that is not included in approval, just yes or no, so to speak, on approval. When you rank your candidates, you convey more information, and also there is no place in the world right now that uses approval voting for public elections, public office elections. It is not used anywhere in the world for that. Ranked choice voting is used many places in the world for that, and I think there's a good reason for it.
Do we have a caller on the line? Oh, they just hung up. Okay. Good. Excuse me, Bill. We just had a technical problem here a minute ago.
Okay.
Are we okay on Blog Talk Radio? We're up there now? Okay, that's a plus. Okay, very good. All right. Bill, in the Libertarian Party, the people who attend the convention, and I didn't attend it this year, are the ones that select who's going to be representing the Libertarian Party. There is no general consensus. I mean, no ballots are sent out to all Libertarian Party members. For example, I don't recall receiving one in my home, and I've been a member of the Libertarian Party for 30 some odd years. And so in that case, who selects, out of the group that were running for the Libertarian Party nomination? Only the people who attend the convention vote for that. But they're not delegates per se; they're just attendees.
No, they are delegates. No, they are empowered.
Delegates? Okay.
They are empowered by their state parties.
Okay, all righty. I didn't know that.
Yes,
Right.
that's what is the case in Virginia, certainly, where there are, at our state convention, which occurred back on March 5, the delegates to the national convention, which occurred on Memorial Day weekend, were selected by the delegates to the LPVA.
Okay. All right, I'm mistaken. Excuse me. We have a caller? All right. Caller, you're on the air. Caller, can you hear me? Area code, 732? Area code 732. Caller, you're on the air. Yep, I guess we're just having a technical problem this morning. It's like me. My brain is stuck, too. We can't get enough? Okay, well, keep on trying, guys, and we'll continue the program. I am disappointed in the fact that Gary Johnson. I'm not disappointed so much in Gary Johnson, although most people consider him libertarian light, if you will, and I think that's probably an accurate description. But by picking a former Republican governor, as running mate, who has, in my opinion, done more harm in what he talks about, is not. He's not even libertarian light. I guess he's Republican light. Did the Libertarian Party have any input on this whatsoever, or did anyone advise Gary Johnson that maybe he should have a stronger person who understands the true libertarian philosophy? I'm very disappointed in that choice, by the way.
Well, I mean, I'm sorry, you're disappointed in the fact that Gary Johnson is the nominee.
Well, I'm a little disappointed in that, mostly disappointed who he picked as vice president.
Okay, well, I would say this much. I would say that, first of all, I was Gary Johnson's nominator, and while there are things that have happened in the campaign that are regrettable, overall, I think it's a very positive thing. And I think we need to look at this from the perspective of the outside world. That is that we've got a situation where we don't have people, because of our election system. We only have at this point a very few state representatives who are now Libertarian Party representatives. I don't believe any of them were elected as libertarians. They've all converted to the Libertarian Party, and I wish them the best in getting reelected. But it's going to be an uphill battle for some of them, given our voting system. But I think that having two governors on the ticket brings a gravity or a gravitas to the ticket that would not occur if we had Libertarian Party activists. I would love to have people who have come up through the Libertarian Party be our presidential nominee, but do they bring credibility to the general public that a Gary Johnson and a William Weld do? And that's kind of our problem right now, is that we don't have a deep bench of state of governors or elected officials at the state level, and no members we've never had a member of either the U.S. House or the U.S. Senate. So it makes it a situation where we either nominate an activist that has very low name ID, and I've been out there. Gary Johnson has good name ID. Back in March, I was petitioning in Illinois, and a lot of people, Gary Johnson, yeah, let me sign. And so it's a sort of a conundrum for us, I think. No, I don't have buyer's regret frankly, for either Johnson or William Weld. While I think that I would have said some things differently, I think that that they are bringing a different message and a pro-freedom message to people in a way they think the American public will find palatable, and maybe a little on the light side for libertarians, but for the average person out there, it strikes them as a breath of fresh air.
Yeah, I guess when I hear Wells speak, I try to put myself in the shoes of someone who's not a libertarian, and from my perspective, I would get confused because he's not right on point when it comes to the precepts of liberty. He sort of is in the middle of the road, and that confuses people. And it just may be I'm not smart enough to understand what he's saying. It just bothers me. We got a caller again. Let's see. Caller 732. You're on the air. Nope. Are we there yet? I don't know why we're having so many problems. We can blame Bill on this, can't we? We'll blame Bill. Okay. Caller 732. You're on the air. Hello. Caller. We can't get. I'm sorry, caller. We cannot hear you. Are we sure we have all the switches on like we should? Okay, well, I'm sorry. We just don't have the line working. Sorry about that. All right, Bill. Let's go on to what's the hot subjects right now with fairvote.org.
Well, I think that number of things. Maine right now is the biggest thing. I mean, it will move. The social change is very difficult and slow, but getting ranked choice voting adopted statewide in a single state, I think, is a big step in the right direction. Now, I don't think that ranked choice voting for single winner elections, I don't think will make minor party candidates and independent candidates widespreadly electable. But I do think that it would get us, because more people would consider voting for us. It would get us more earned media, and I think it would mean a lot fewer debate exclusions. So those are two very positive steps. I think that otherwise we work for proportional representation in legislatures. There might be a choice voting act introduced in Congress at some point. We hope that will be the case. That will give states the option. Right now, single-member legislative districts are mandated by law for U.S. House. We'd like to get that changed and allow states the option of multi-member districts for U.S. House in those states that could have such a thing. And that is really, I think, what could open things up to Libertarian Party candidates being elected to Congress and state legislatures, if they would do that for state legislatures. So there's that going on as well, and frankly that's very important in the long run, I think, for the electability of candidates from outside the two older parties.
Here's my problem. Anybody with maybe more than 2 or 3 brain cells functioning can look at our current system and say, this is very skewed to maintain the status quo. I mean, you don't have to be a political analyst or anything. It's all skewed.
Right.
Everything is biased to a point where if you're not part of the infrastructure of this corrupt system, it's very difficult to get anywhere, if nearly impossible. What bothers me is that those people in office who are representing the people, the servants of the people, they all know this. Every one of those stumble bums know this, and yet none of them want to change it. So to me, that translates to they're all bums, every one of them. I mean, I don't give any one of them any credit, because if you want to if they had any credibility, they would be screaming at the top of their lungs that this whole system is rotten. We have to change it to make the people's voices truly heard, and not vote for me and I'll represent you, and then you go back to doing what you've been doing before. And I find the whole system probably one of the most rotten systems in all the major free world countries.
No, I absolutely agree.
Oh boy!
I think that look, one thing I would recommend everybody watch is recently. I don't know if you saw it, Joe, on Reason.tv. There was a 12-minute interview with Richard Winger. You're probably familiar with Richard Winger, and he said that right off the bat in the interview, he said, if you just have two parties, you have repression. It's not natural for there to be only two political parties. It's a complicated world, and to herd people into one of two major tents means that you are cutting off, the political establishment is cutting off other viable political options out there, making them, cutting them off entirely or making them non-viable. And that's the system that we have right now. And I see such political tribalism. I mean, I just don't, I myself, I'm still waiting to hear a good explanation as to why somebody would vote for Donald Trump. I heard one explanation from a guy who's a member of Mensa, actually, and he said to me that he was going to vote for Donald Trump because it would be easier for the House to convict, U.S. House to convict, and U.S. Senate to remove him from office than would be the case with Hillary Clinton. Okay.
That's I
was sitting in the same room with him, so I couldn't do that. All right. I wanted to. Yeah. I thought, oh, come on, you've got to be kidding me.
You bit your tongue, right? You had to bite your tongue.
But I didn't do that. He's a nice guy. He's a friend. But I've heard, and it just, I'm literally stunned when I hear people say they're going to vote for Donald Trump. I just by his personal behavior, leave the policy aside. Just his history and his personal behavior makes him completely ill qualified for the we're sitting at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue. But one other thing we have in this nation is also, my point is political tribalism is simply alive and well. I mean, I'm sure there are many Republicans who feel they've got to fall in line right now. One of them may be, I haven't heard from Rand Paul recently, but I'll bet he's running for re-election in the U.S. Senate in Kentucky. I bet he feels he can't buck Donald Trump right now because of backlash from Trump voters in Kentucky. He wants their vote, so he can't diss Trump right now, even though I would imagine he would like to. But the other thing is that we have such shallow political discourse in my view.
Right.
I'll give you an example. Robert Sarvis was the Libertarian candidate for governor in 2013 in Virginia, and after the campaign was over, I said, let me ask you a question. I said, let's take an issue here. Let's talk about legalization of gambling in Virginia, because gambling is, except for the state lottery and very minor exceptions, usually gambling events for charity, very minor exceptions, gambling is illegal in Virginia. And I said, did it ever come up during the campaign for governor that we've got legal gambling, got a big casino that's about to open in the D.C. metropolitan area, but it's in Maryland. The eastern panhandle of West Virginia has a casino. Gambling opening up all over the place. You got it in Oklahoma. And I said, did the issue of legalization of gambling in Virginia ever come up during the campaign? He said no. It never came up except for one person who asked him privately about that question. It never even came up. Issues like initiatives and referenda, even the divorce laws in Virginia. I mean, you never hear, you go to an event like the Chamber of Commerce debates or something like that, all of the questions are prepackaged sort of in favor of big government, because you got a bunch of government contractors there. So, aren't you going to be committed to fund this and this? Leading questions that almost inevitably lead to pro-big government answers from people who are living off government. And it's just the political discourse in this nation at times, leaving the election system aside, and I think actually the election system that we have encourages shallow political discourse, but that's another problem that we have here in the U.S. in my opinion.
Well, even during the debates, what I enjoy watching is the election for the Prime Minister of England.
Mm-hmm.
I never forget on the last election, they had all the parties that were running, that qualified to run, and there were several. There were like 7 or 8 of them. Nigel Farage was one of them, who's one of my favorites. And what was interesting is that Cameron, who was the reigning prime minister, his place on the stage was where Ron Paul was in our election. Right in the corner, in the center, were no-name people. They were given the primary spots. And it is amazing. We have several debates and during the primary election, and the main candidates always have center stage and are given a majority of the time. I mean, the thing is so rigged. Everyone recognizes it's so rigged. And we look overseas, and I say to myself, you know, we actually fought a war to break away from England. We should beg England to take us back so we can get some of our rights back.
I hear you on the election system. Now they still have first past the post, but at least, you know, I would like people to be able to yell at the president when he's speaking to the U.S. House chamber. They all have to sit there quietly, but to have the sort of back and forth that you see in the House of Commons when the prime minister goes, that is something that is needed. To have people called out on the spot for saying silly things would be a great palliative to the American political process. But you're right. I mean, it's not just our voting system that props up the two older parties. There are other things that and everybody, all the media sort of fall in line to propping them up. The focus is just on those two, and everybody else, oh, you're a fringe candidate. And and the thing is that so many people just feel, you know, I'm just going to go with the flow. It's just easier. Some person said to me once, Bill, it's just, why do you do this? It's just easy, you know, Libertarian Party involvement. It's just easier to go with the flow. And I said, you know what? You're right. It is easier just to go with the flow.
It certainly is.
So and that's it. And then businesses, I mean, you know, the biggest, some of the biggest defenders of the status quo are going to be the chambers of commerce. You know, that businesses don't want, and I certainly understand the problem of regime uncertainty, but it just so much in the way of private interests backing the status quo and the stasis that we have, and we really do have stasis that is hurting this nation in our politics.
You know, the one question that was asked of all of the candidates during the primary of the Republicans, and the question, there were about 8 people on stage at the time, and the question was, what is America's #1 problem? And everyone to a fault said radical Islamic terrorism. And you probably heard me because I was screaming so loud on television. I'm sure it went through the airwaves. No, it's a corrupt government and the ignorance of the American people to recognize how corrupt it is and playing along with them. And everyone said the same thing. No one said anything different. And I went nuts. I said, no, that's not our #1 problem. And what really bothers me is that when they say Islamic terrorism, no one asked them, why does someone want to travel 7,000 miles, cross the Atlantic Ocean, cross the Mediterranean Sea, all this other stuff, to come here to plant a bomb? I mean, they can't plant the bomb 20 miles away from their home. I mean, they have to travel 7,000 miles to get here. No one asked, why do they want to do this? All we say is that they want to do it. And no one thinks through the process that if we only left people alone, if we allowed the people to free trade with other people around the world, no one would come over here and want to bomb people that you do business with or you're friends with. It doesn't work that way. That's not human nature. But no one brings it up. All we talk about is radical Islamic terrorism, which I think is just another catchword for you do what the government tells you to do.
Well, Joe, I almost completely agree with what you said there. I think that, first of all, I mean, the statistics, so many people die from so many other reasons than since 9/11. Of course, 9/11 was a heinous act that was horrible. But since then, I think there's been an average of maybe 7 Americans killed per year by terrorists, something like that. I mean, it's an extremely low number. They're all tragedies, certainly, but relative to other things that happen in our society, oh my God, car accidents and this and that, it is a very small number. And I would, yeah, I don't know. There's a certain mentality about the Republican Party that I just don't understand. I mean, if you were to ask me what the biggest problem was or it is in the United States right now, I'd say it's our declining economic freedom, or not. It's
Yeah.
that the American people either don't understand economic freedom or don't care about it, and
Right.
that's seen in the economic freedom of the world index, where we have plummeted in the United States from number 2 in economic freedom, behind Hong Kong in 2000, to number 16, and the people just, like I said, they don't either understand the concept or they don't care about it, and that declining appreciation for economic freedom and the prosperity that it brings, I think, is the biggest problem facing this nation.
Yeah. And when you ask people, why are you voting for Trump? They say, oh, he's going to make America great again. I go,
Right.
hey, guess what? We can't think. We're not a thinking nation anymore. And I think this comes from people going to government schools that don't permit thinking, because if you do, you're being disobedient or disrespectful or whatever it is, the term you want to apply to it. And so you're not allowed to express yourself anymore, but you must memorize and keep your mouth shut and just obey. And it looks like this is what we have. During these riots with these Black Lives Matter unit, when they interview these people that are on the streets, and I think to myself, I'm 73 years old. I'm still working. I don't have time to be on the streets. I got too much to do, and I don't have to work, And here are people who have no jobs, or maybe have a minimal job or a part-time job. They should be concerned about what are they going to do for tomorrow. How are they going to build their lives, help their families, and whatever. And they're on the streets burning stuff down because everyone hates them for some reason. No one's thinking. I mean, this is the most non-thinking nation in the world.
Well, I'm not sure about that, but I will say that there. I run across. Believe me, I share your frustration because, like I said, I've heard a lot of just crazy explanations or non-explanations for why people are voting for Donald Trump, and to a certain extent, the same thing for Hillary Clinton.
Right. Same thing.
But particularly, I'm stuck with Donald Trump, where I just really haven't heard good explanations why.
Yeah, and what do you think about this 15%? You have to be polling 15% in order to be in the debates. Isn't that exclusionary? I mean,
Well, of course. I mean,
you've got to be a major candidate with major ties to funding, et cetera, just to be in a debate. I mean,
right.
We're not asking you to take over. You're not going to have any power. You just want your voice heard, and you can't get your voice heard. 15% is nearly impossible unless you're a Ross Perot. You have billions of dollars to throw around, and people are fed up.
Well, plus, when Ross Perot was included in the debates in 1992, the 15% rule wasn't there, and so that's how he got in. He was excluded in '96, although I think his '96 campaign was, not nearly as robust as his '92 campaign. No, of course, it's meant to be exclusionary. They know exactly what they're doing, and it's part of the system. And the subtle message is, it's unstated, but it's there. These are the only two legitimate candidates. All right, all the other candidates simply are not legitimate, and that's the message I think a lot of people take away.
It's like having a marriage and telling your wife, well, here are all the things that I can do, and you can't do them. That's the way it is. I mean, it's an insane system, and it bothers me that you don't hear the mainstream candidates, the people that are in office, talking about these items. I mean, these are the items that really matter and make a difference in America, not extreme Islamic terrorism. I'm tired of hearing it. I wish they would their tongues would fall out if they ever mention it again. I'm saying it because I'm angry, But those things that make that make a difference to our entire system of government, that allows people to participate in this government, they've all been eliminated. They're violations of our rights now, not our rights. They're violations of our rights. But these clowns don't say a thing about them.
No, I understand. There are many issues that are going unaddressed. And, sometimes I run across people who say, well, you libertarians, meaning Libertarian Party members, well, yeah, I agree with you, but, this Republican over here, he's okay, he's not bad, he puts in some good bills, he votes for some good bills. I say, okay, that's fine. What about the legislation that's not there? What legislation would we like to see that's not there that a libertarian would put in and work for passing? Yeah. And it's the damning with faint praise. I hear that. Well, that guy's not so bad. I'm going to vote for him. Come on. It's not just what's there, but what's not there that has to be.
I think because we have a two-party system, it's a caste system in a way. You can see that's resulting in a bifurcation of America. We're not together anymore. We have a lot of angry people on one side and a lot of angry people on the other side. And I think what they don't realize is that if in fact we had a free system and everyone had a voice, even though we don't agree, we all had an equal voice, we wouldn't have this bifurcation. Do you buy into that proposition?
I think a multi-party system, again, is more natural. And, there's a system, if people are interested, I'll tell you what system I like is something called personally accountable representation. And you can find out more by going to genuinerepresentation.org. But there have been compromises worked out in the past, such as there were compromises and model legislation worked out between the chemical industry and environmentalists. They got together, both sides sent representatives, people they trusted, to sort of bargain with the other side, and they actually all agreed ultimately on legislation. But then it goes to Congress and it goes nowhere. And this genuine representation process would, if it were implemented in the legislature, you'd have multi-member districts, and people would be able to rank their choices, and then actually the winners, right, the top 5 from a district or whatever, would have different voting power based on the number of people who supported them, and there would be an attempt to establish more personal contact between voters and the people they ultimately voted into office. And it's difficult to explain quickly, but it's important for people to believe in a representative or trust in a representative. He is there bargaining on my behalf, and we don't really have that now. We have territories, we have pieces of real estate, districts which are represented, not necessarily people. Maybe the person who represents me in Virginia doesn't live in my area, maybe lives in Richmond or Roanoke or Virginia Beach. And to be able to send that person to the legislature and to trust in that person to negotiate in the legislature on my behalf with other legislators who are representing other people to reach an agreement that is really the best possible outcome for all parties. We need a more robust political system to achieve that, because the one we have right now most certainly is not. And I hear people say gridlock is good. I don't think gridlock is good. We have a budget deficit this year, federal budget deficit, $590 billion roughly, and it's going to grow. We have a lot of problems that are not being addressed and are just ossifying basically because of the gridlock in our legislatures, particularly the U.S. Congress, and it's not good for the future of this nation. We need people who are going to go there and work out the best possible outcome for all parties, address our problems, solve them, and move this nation forward.
What's your projection if Hillary gets elected? What changes you think will be made? Where do you think we're going? Or is that an unfair question? If it's an unfair question, tell me. It's okay.
No, I think it depends. I'll tell you what. I mean, if she gets elected, I hope the Democrats don't get control of the Senate and the House, because Lord only knows what might happen then. Of course, you're going to have 60 votes. The Democrats won't have 60 votes in the U.S. Senate, but boy, I hope there's some sort of check on her if she is elected president, which appears to be the case, although you never know. I mean, I never thought Donald Trump would come close to getting the Republican nomination, let alone getting it. And so I'd like to rule him out at this point, but I can't. But I don't know. I just think that if she gets a Democratic Congress, I'm afraid this nation is going to go further left on economics, which is going to be very poisonous for our prosperity over the long run, in my opinion.
Yeah. Is there a possibility of Gary Johnson being in the next debate?
I don't know if they've been announced. I don't think so, frankly. It is now, it's 5 days away, and I don't know if the announcement has been made. There was a rally just yesterday or the day before down at the CPD offices in D.C., and so we're now, I think October 19th is the final debate, and I see no sign that he's going to be included in that.
Yeah, I have found these debates between Hillary and Donald Trump to be absolutely worthless. I mean, absolutely worthless.
I'll admit. I mean, it's nice. if I were chairman of the Libertarian Party, which I was from 2006 to 2010, I would have felt impelled as a part of my job to watch, but I'll admit I haven't watched a single second of either presidential debate or vice presidential. I've got them on my DVR. I've got them all on my DVR, but I don't have the intestinal fortitude to go back and watch them. And I sort of figure that if I really want to, I'll read the transcripts. But I've seen clips on the news or online, and just the few minutes I've seen online afterwards, I'm like, oh my God, I just don't have the stomach to go watch.
Well, I went to a watch party for the first debate, and it was great because I was so tired that day. I sat down in this comfortable chair, immediately went to sleep. They woke me up when it was over. I thought it was great. 1 second, please. I'm serious. Is he on the line?
No, we can't get the phone line.
Oh, we can't get the phone line, but we do have a question here. And his question is, ask Mr. Redpath if he has seen the video from Clinton Curtis's, is that
Clinton
Curtis, where he claims to
be able to flip voting percentages.
Flip voting percentages. I don't even know what that means.
Where he confesses to something like that. So.
Do you know what are you familiar with that?
I do not know. I've never heard of this gentleman, Mr. Curtis, and I can't. Obviously hackers have gotten into email servers. I don't know what their capabilities are. Is it possible? Yeah, I suppose it's possible in some way. I don't know that it's happened. I don't know the security that's been undertaken after these revelations or whatever that hackers perhaps have gotten into the election systems of certain states. So I really don't know. I mean, it may be credible, it may not. I don't know. I don't know.
Well, the good news is that if Donald Trump does get elected, he'll make America great again, right, Bill?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I'm sure of that.
I hear that from people all the time. They say, "Why are you voting for Donald Trump? He's going to make America great again." I go, "Yeah, how?" "Oh, he's a businessman. He knows how to do that." I said, "That's very good. Very good."
It's unbelievable. I mean, I've got a plan to defeat ISIS. It's a secret plan. All these plans. We're going to have a health plan. It's going to be great. But then that's as far as it goes.
Yeah.
I mean, this is all ridiculous. How can somebody vote for somebody who insults their intelligence like that?
Well, maybe there's no intelligence there. I mean, that's what scares me is that people, again, I go back to my premises that people are not thinking. I mean, they're intelligent people, but they have lost their ability to critically think things out. I'm always critically thinking. I always go, that's not right, because I'm not smart. I'm not smart, but I've learned to really think. I've had to. I've been in business. I have to do that. I've made enough mistake and lost enough money that you get forced to doing that. And when people are not forced to really critically think, like, ISIS wants to kill us, then you ask, well, why? They don't know the answer. I know why, because we kill them.
Or they've
retribution.
heard, or they've heard George W. Bush say that, they came after us because of our freedoms. Well,
That's
that's
right.
ridiculous. I mean, they didn't come after us. And this is not to justify or excuse any act of terrorism or violence whatsoever, but to state that is completely ridiculous. I mean, you could ask Osama bin Laden, why did you do it? And he'll tell you about Saudi Arabia and Israel and Iraq. And that doesn't justify it, obviously, but you got to understand the motivation behind why people do things before you can defend against them in the future.
And we will not accept the fact that we are the perpetrators of most of these things. We initiate most of the ill that results in a lot of the ill-gotten effects of what's going on around the world, and we initiate most of it, but we won't recognize that. We only want to talk about the actual end result, the last thing that happens.
Well, I would highly recommend, I think of Stephen Kinzer and his book, I forget the name of it, is it Blowback or something like that, but he chronicles the history of U.S. involvement and, in Hawaii and I think the Philippines, I'd have to go back. But anyway, he goes through, going back to the late 19th century, American involvement overseas, Guatemala, and how we took actions in Guatemala for the United Fruit Company, and it's of course the whole thing in Iran, had to do with the 1953 coup with Mossadegh, Mossadegh, I think. I'm not sure how to pronounce it off the top of my head, but you hear about these histories, and then you think, well, no wonder people in those cases. What if too many Americans don't stop to think, well, what if somebody did that to us?
I know, that's what if they did that to us, we go nuts. We would nuke everybody. The whole world would be nuked at this point.
Obviously, if somebody came into our nation and did that, we'd rightfully be pretty PO'd.
Right. Yeah. Well, the good news is that if Hillary or Donald Trump get elected, maybe Oklahoma and Texas will secede from the Union and we won't have this problem.
Yeah, well, I hope I can get over the border crossing to see you, Joe.
Okay. Bill, we have about another minute or so left. Let me, I'll allow you to conclude this broadcast.
Well, it's I vote Libertarian. And seriously, it has been said that the second most important election, Larry Diamond said this, who is an academic and with the Hoover Institution, I believe he edits Journal of Democracy, but he has said that the second most important election in the United States on November 8, 2016 is question 5 in Maine, the ranked choice voting initiative. And I think it will pass. I'm cautiously optimistic that it will pass. But it's a step. It's not perfect, but it's a step in the right direction to begin to open things up to other parties than the R's and D's, and more voices, more choices at the ballot box, and to allow people to cast more effective votes and hopefully elect more rational leaders than we have in the past. So everybody needs to keep their eye on question 5 in Maine, because it's really important to the future of democracy in this nation and a more open and inclusive political system.
Well, Bill, thank you so much for being on our program, and I want to thank you for all that you do for everyone, for their liberty and their freedom.
Joe, thank you very much, and the same to you. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you. Folks, this is the end of today's broadcast. We'd like to thank our sponsors for the financial support, and we'd like to thank you for listening in. You can further the cause of liberty by recommending this program to your friends, and let us hear from you. Our email address is comments@libertytalkradio.com. Remember, you're either allowing your liberties to be taken away or you're striving to protect them. Unfortunately, there is no middle ground. Until next time, this is Joe Cristiano. You've been listening to Liberty Talk Radio. Stay well. Stay tuned.